Mr. President, I have the responsibility and the privilege to be the chair of something called the Strategic Forces Subcommittee of the Committee on Armed Services. Strategic Forces is a euphemism for nuclear weapons, and it is one of the most serious threats that we continue to face. We face threats all over the world, from pandemics, from terrorism, from a rising China, from a belligerent Russia. But one of the most serious that sometimes gets lost in the discussion is the unthinkable catastrophe that would be a nuclear exchange. Throughout the last 70-plus years, our principal strategy for dealing with that threat has been deterrence. The idea that if you use nuclear weapons against the United States of America, you will pay the heaviest of prices. And that deterrence has worked. There hasn't been a use of nuclear weapons since 1945. And there are now several, I can't say the exact number for classification reasons, but there are a number of nuclear countries in the world, nuclear-armed countries, China and Russia among them. China is expanding its nuclear capability exponentially. Over the past several years, they have been embarked on an enormous buildup of their nuclear capability. But I want to talk about a nuclear threat today in the context of the nomination that I'm going to move in a few moments, that to me is one of the most terrifying, because it's a nuclear threat that deterrence doesn't work on. A nuclear threat that deterrence, the fundamental strategy of our prevention of nuclear conflict for 70 years, doesn't work. What is that threat? The threat of nuclear terrorism. If you're not representing a country and if you don't care about dying, then the idea of a nuclear response doesn't scare you. It doesn't deter you from taking that kind of action. How do we defend against that? What is Deterrence 2.0 in the current world where international terrorism, although it has not been on the front pages recently, is still there? ISIS-K, ISIS, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula are all still there. Boko Haram in Africa. They're all still there. They're all plotting. They're all working on ways that they can attack the West and the United States of America. If they could get a hold of the nuclear technology and nuclear building block, which is enriched uranium, they would use it. The terrorists who killed 3,000 people on September 11th would have killed 3 million if they could have. And so keeping nuclear materials and nuclear technology out of the hands of terrorists is, to me, one of the most important functions that our government can perform. And that brings me to the nomination of Corey Hinderstein for the position of Deputy Administrator for Nuclear Nonproliferation. She is immensely qualified, has worked in this field for almost 20 years, has worked on nuclear proliferation and non-proliferation issues for most of those years, both in the government and in the private sector. I would venture to say there is probably no one in the United States who knows as much about this subject as she does. Ms. Hinderstein will be responsible for a major part of the budget, $1.9 billion. But she's responsible for controlling the proliferation of nuclear materials, and that is so critical in light of the threat of nuclear terrorism. The only way we can keep them from attacking us is intelligence, knowing what is coming, and keeping these materials out of their hands. And that's why this job is so important. She was approved by the committee and recommended to the Senate 40 days ago. It's time to move this nomination. Nominations can be held up for a variety of reasons and some policy reasons, and I understand that. But not in this case. And I'm happy to report that it appears that this nomination will not be held up, because I think all of our colleagues realize how important this function is in the government. The best nuclear strike is the one that doesn't occur. And the only way to prevent that is to stop the proliferation of nuclear materials. This problem is only growing. We know that Iran is now enriching uranium to much higher extent than they did under the JCPOA. We know that North Korea is pursuing its own nuclear ambitions. India, Pakistan both have nuclear programs. So this is a clear and present danger to the United States of America, and that's why this nomination is so important. And so, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination, calendar 475, that the Senate vote on the nomination, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, that no further motions be in order to the nomination, that any statements related to the nomination be printed in the record, and that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session, all with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection? Seeing no objection, the clerk will report.
Nomination, Department of Energy, Corey Hinderstein of Virginia to be Deputy Administrator for Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation, National Nuclear Security Administration.
If there's no further debate, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Nomination is confirmed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.